Hello, and welcome to another episode of Songs Nobody Asked Me For. I'm trying a new microphone today. I bought, there's the box here. This is what I should have got a long time ago. Beginning of this, it's a Zoom H5 Studio microphone, and yeah, giving it a try. Studio quality sound everywhere you go, you know. I tried it at a band practice the other day, and I'm doing another interview next week. No, this week. Tomorrow? No, Wednesday. Wednesday. You can see I'm not with it today. And yeah, so I thought I would try out by doing one of these. And that's sort of harder than it might sound, really, because I've actually been in a little bit of a sort of mental block with this for the last 3 weeks. I kind of realise it's a little bit like songwriting, and that, you know, sometimes you kind of got to be in the mood for it. And it's got to flow from you. And because this has all been new, I've been really chucking them out and sort of trying to think of these different things, and then I haven't been able to, really, and then so I've stopped, and I stopped for a few weeks, and I thought that's okay, and it is okay, because, you know, so far ahead of myself that I think it's all right to sort of do that, really. But I was also a bit worried about it, because I was thinking, oh no, you know, what if I've lost it? What if that's it? I've done everything, said everything I want to say, but I don't think I have. Hopefully not. No, hopefully not for me, because it'd be a bit sad to sort of get this thing going and then find I've got nothing to say for myself. But I thought I was in that place for a while, and then a couple of things happened, really. As I went on the radio. I went on a radio station called Ocean City Radio. It's an independent radio station in Plymouth, and you know, sort of big for small independent radio stations, and they've been lovely and really interested in interviewing me about the podcast, and in that talking about the band and original music. And I'm going to try, if I can, to put the link to that interview I did, just, you know, on here somewhere, on the blurb at the beginning, if it's on Spotify, at the bottom underneath in YouTube, if that's where you're watching. And yeah, it's about a 3-hour program. They do a long program, but I was on the second hour and a half. So yeah, you can check that out if you want to. I think I did okay, survived. You know, sort of seemed to be. I'm always trying to be constructive and positive and helpful, because, you know, I've always felt that none of this is to be critical of anybody else doing anything else, really. I really do admire musicians doing any sort of music. I think the problem is it's the situation we all find ourselves in today, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. Because when I was doing that podcast, the radio program, John in the band was a little bit worried about me doing it, and he was saying, you know, look, just be careful, because, you know, you could, if you're really negative about this or that, you know, you could end up with us not being able to get gigs and this sort of thing. And I thought, well, no, and, you know, I said, oh no, it'd be fine. And then I did reflect on it, and it panicked me for a few minutes, because I was thinking, oh my goodness. And then I thought, it'd be good to just be thinking this through and thinking, well, what is it that I'm actually sharing? You know, what is it that I'm actually doing? Because do I want to be critical of him? I don't really, you know. So I was thinking, well, no, I really admire anybody doing any of these things, you know. And people in covers bands are doing something different. People who are doing original music are doing something different. Tribute acts, something different. Different types of music and genre. People who have places that provide support for music, they're doing different things. But this podcast is about the dilemmas and difficulties of trying to keep doing original music and songwriting and things, you know. So the first thing was I wanted to describe a way of getting somebody to understand the situation, because I think, you know, the DJ guy that I met initially, I think, was thinking, oh, it'd be great to come and talk about how terrible it is out there. And I kind of thought, and he said something about, you know, oh, you know, it's supposed to be so difficult, all these covers bands, and I said, well, it's okay, you know, it's just part of an ecosystem. And then I got into this ecosystem description, and I thought I might share that with you today, because I kind of think it helps to me to understand where we are today in terms of listening to music, and whether there's any way of reversing that, and if I can be any small part in reversing that, you know, not reversing it, but just shifting around the ecosystem. And I'm sort of borrowing from a therapy model from systemic family therapy, and it's a model by two people called Carter and McGoldrick, and it's to sort of understand organisations, and it has sort of horizontal parameters and sort of parameters through time in a family, really, or in a system. You can use it for families, you can use it for systems. And it has sort of circles around it, which represent sort of, you know, essentially you have an individual and then they work within an organisation. So they have their team they're in, and that team has a manager, and that manager has another manager, and that manager has another manager. If you're in a health service, it goes on forever. And then, but beyond that, you have the government or local government, and then you have the government, and then you have, you know, you eventually get to world situation. And what it's helpful to think about is when you're thinking about this particular person that's you can't understand why they're behaving, looking behind them and thinking, well, what's going on for them, what's influencing them. That's where I started with, and the vertical line is just time. It's a process of time. So if you're an organisation or if you're a family, things evolve over a period and pattern of time. So you know, it's a useful model. I kind of adapted. This is where I started, and I felt that in order to understand where we are, first of all, you have to go back in time, and you have to look at two things. And one is, what I think now we might understand as, is this phenomenal period of many decades, 60s right through to the 90s, I guess, which were the sort of height of rock and pop music, really. And this amazing original stuff, you know, all the bands that people would love, all of the music that we all know, all came really generated through that period of time. You've got some in the noughties, and there's still that music around. But, you know, maybe different music is around now, maybe sort of hip hop or soul or rap or whatever it might be is more popular. But that's a period in which that sort of music, you know, all those classic, amazing songs that you might have, and I'm not going to use an example because we all know what they are, there's so many of them. But that's that period when that evolves and develops and maintains itself before music changes. And it changes for some particular reasons, I think. So first of all, we have this massive bulk of music sitting in the past. Then you have people like me that are kind of like baby boomers, you know, with a big group of people. So with a big market moving into our, you know, 50s to 60s, maybe to 70s, but 50s to 60s. And that's where all the money is. So, you know, there's a lot of money in memorabilia these days, you know, a lot of money in remakes of films and series and lots of reshowing of old programs and YouTube and all sorts of things allow us to sort of recreate and go back to these things. And of course, many retrospective programs and documentaries and video and showings of live gigs and that from bands from the particularly 70s, 80s, 90s, maybe into the noughties again. A lot of that's for my generation. So you have this massive bulk of all these amazing songs. And then you have the baby boomers who want to listen to it. You can see where I'm heading with that. But there's another thing alongside of this, and that is that when I was a young man, young teenager and man in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, particularly the 70s and the 80s, we listened to music in a particular way. So we listened to it on vinyl. Now there's a massive vinyl resurgence, and maybe that will start to hook into some of this at some point. But when we were listening on vinyl, there's a particular thing about that, and that is that you, generally speaking, it's quite hard to skip a track. You can, but I think we used to listen in a different way, you know. So I would take an album, you know, and I would think, in fact, I remember, I spoke on the radio thing. I'm always talking about being a nerdy Genesis fan, so I remember when Duke came out. And I remember buying it new, and I bought it, and it was in cellophane, you know, it come in cellophane. I didn't open it. What I did was I rang my best friend up, who was also into Genesis, and said, I've bought the new album. And he said, come over this evening, you know. So I went over, and what you do is you sit down, you know, in his room he had this amazing stereo system, this big stack system with everything, you know, graphic equalizer and, you know, really amazing turntable, and these big speakers with woofers and tweakers and all sorts of different things, whistles and bangs, if you like. And so we'd open the cellophane, and I would pass him like this very carefully the vinyl. We would listen to a side, and one of us would have the gatefold, and the other would have the inner sleeve, which usually had the words in it. Gatefold would have pictures and credits and all these sorts of things, and we'd spend our time sort of exploring these things together, really. And it really meant that you couldn't skip. So I think there was a certain discipline in listening to original music, because you're listening to new stuff for the first time. And if you start to not like a track so much, you kind of have to listen to it all. And when you've done that a few times, you kind of get used to the album and the tracks, and then you think, I like this, and then you grow to like it. Now I think that surely at some level must have reflected also people's ability to listen to new music when they went out, you know, because we're more used to it. You're sort of sitting there thinking, I like this, I'm going to listen to this. So you get in a vibe, listen, and then maybe you go a few times to see a band and you learn their stuff. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but I think it doesn't happen as much, and it's not as natural a thing for people to do these days, because we all stream music. as a rule, in different ways. I stream music, and if I've got an album I'm listening to, so that Duke album, so maybe I start, and I know it starts with Behind the Lines and Duchess, and then maybe there's a song called Man of Our Times, maybe I don't like that so much, so I start listening, I don't like that, so I just flick it on, and I listen to the next one, and the next one, and then I flick another one, so we're able to do this in a way that we couldn't do before, and I think that reflects something on how we now listen to music. So accessing new music is hard, I think. Okay, so that's the history of a big wealth of original material that's fantastic, varied within the rock and pop genres. Then you have the baby boomers, who are people who love that music, getting older, and as we get older, I do this, we like to look back on and listen to that music again. And then we also have the way we listen to music shifting from a space where we had to really just sit and focus on it to swipe, swipe, swipe. I don't have to listen to this, listen to that. Oh, I like this, I know this. Oh, there's one I know. And also, of course, I can play, which I do as well. I have playlists. I have one called Stuff. It's just called Stuff. And what I've done over time is every single thing I've ever liked or been interested in goes on there. And when we're travelling place, there's probably about 12, 14 hours worth of stuff on there these days. And I just put it on random, and again, track comes up, we're driving along, my wife doesn't like it, she'll just flick it on. Or if I don't like that one, well, I've listened to that one, I heard that one the other day. It's a very different way of listening to music. So we have all these things. So that's the vertical, that's the timeline, if you like. Now, the rings are not the same. What I think instead is that we have an ecosystem. And I think there are three distinct areas that mix. It's almost like you could have one of those Venn diagrams, I suppose, with the three circles and they mix in the middle, because some people do all of these things. But this is how I'm going to sort of understand it and describe it to you, really. So, what we have is we start off with, I'm going to start off with the opposite end to me, really, which is tribute acts. Now, tribute acts, I think, is a relatively recent thing. I'm talking decades, but relatively recent. Because, again, there wasn't the wealth. You might have got a Beatles band, but, you're not going to get many bands replicating exactly when maybe in the 70s or the 80s, because there isn't the background to do that, because there's so much new music coming out that's amazing. So I think it's something of the late 90s and the noughties and and it's a sort of contained place of its own. It's this size, it's a particular size. Maybe it grows a little, but I think it's limited at some level by the amount of people you've got around who can actually sound like people in an exact way. I talked on one of these earlier episodes about going to see a band called Bruce Juice, and a Joni Mitchell sort of tribute band, really. I'm going to see a Genesis one with a friend of mine soon called G2. Looking forward to it. And they're replicating an actual concert from a tour in 1978. I love that. It's a particular thing, particular body of music that's a time of that band that I really like, and I'm really looking forward to that. And the interesting thing about tribute acts is they seem to be the bands that people will pay money for. That's 25 quid a ticket, for a band that's playing somebody else's music, and that's fine, but people like it and they're polished. It's really hard work. I've said this in the episode I did. I think to do that stuff must take so much practice, discipline, development. It's amazing. But you have this idea, that's part of the ecosystem. And then at the other end, you have original music, and that's the part of the ecosystem I'm in. And we'll come back to it, but these sort of two areas. Now, in the middle, you have part of the ecosystem I would call covers bands. Now, there's a range of them. There are amazing covers bands. There are covers bands that do a particular genre, that maybe that puts them in that Venn diagram of joining the tribute acts, whereas they're playing the music and recreating it, whereas they're not actually looking like, dressing like, sounding like, viewing like an actual band. So that Bruce Juice is very much a tribute act, but there might be another type of band where they're playing just one or two particular bands, but they don't look like them or sound like them. And then you've got covers bands all the way through to some fairly generic ones and some pretty naff ones, but I think add that history into that then, and I think a number of things happen in this way, horizontally. So I think that part of the ecosystem gets swollen. Now, along the back of all of this is a lack of support, money, investment in sort of the ability for small venues and places to survive doing local music and supporting original music. And quite right, I understand that really. So, but it's very easy when you're a struggling venue, if you have a good covers band, people walk in, I walk in, somebody's playing, I don't know, Money for Nothing, and I think, oh, I know that song, Money for Nothing, yeah, I remember that. Or, a particular song that maybe makes me think of a particular time and a place, and I think, oh, wow, I love that song. And it's hooked me, and I'm straight there, and it's not going to be offensive to me. I'm going to know it, I'm going to feel comfortable there, I'm going to be enjoying listening to it, and it's really going to work for me, and it works for the venue. And so everyone's happy, the band are great, there's such a buzz. And obviously, I think the history of this comes through, like sort of, I don't know what you'd call them, function bands, I have an in-law who plays in a band that does so many weddings and things like that. And they're brilliant, Played at his own wedding and they were fantastic, and everybody's up dancing. And I get it, that's I can get it within that context. But I think what's happened is that part of the ecosystem is swollen. It's feeding on everything, just because it can, and it is, and it's easy. Because this body sits within that body of music that I talked about in the vertical part of this model, in which there's all that music from the 70s, 80s and 90s in particular for those covers bands to recreate. Brad talked in the podcast I did with him a very long time ago now, about, he'd have a 3-striker now. He said that they would play a track they wanted to play, but if people weren't up and dancing to it after three times they'd played it, that they would just, however they felt about it, they wouldn't play it, But you can do that because there's so much material you have, You can pick from all of this. It's just picking and picking because it's all there, and people love it. Of course people love it. And I enjoy it too. It's great. But what it's doing is at a time when venues are pressured and they don't have a lot of money and some are closing, it's far easier to take a punt on the idea that you've got a band playing who are going to play music that people are going to know and love and enjoy and then stay and buy drinks and pack the place out, than it is having an originals band. And so I think the pool for originals bands is getting smaller and smaller. That's my sense of it. We were very lucky. We've played 2 gigs recently. I've talked about playing at the B Bar, what a great place it was in Plymouth there. We played at the Lou Weekender just this Saturday. So that's what today is, Monday. So yeah, a couple of days ago. Fantastic. It's really been nice to have 2 gigs in a row that had quite a lot of people there. There were probably about 70, 80 people watching us. We were on the West Lou Quay stage. I think probably one of the biggest stages there, run by a guy called Mark that I know well, and didn't realise it was him when I was chatting about a year or 2 ago, and once worked out how it was, and he's been saying, I'll get you onto this Lou Weekender festival. Only festival we've done this year. I've talked about festivals, but maybe I need to talk more about festivals at some point. They're very hard to get onto these days, really hard. So we were lucky. And we played on this stage, and we were the first act on. We were on at 1 o'clock. The covers bands on after us. And again, it's raining on Friday. It was really sunny, and he was saying they'd had 300-400 people packed, and it's not a huge. It's an open tent. You can get probably about 100 people, 120, 150 people. Now maybe about 100 in the tent. So to have 300 or 400, they were all packed outside by the estuary there. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And Lou is amazing, and Lou is such a great place for music. I really, really want to big them up because lots of venues, lots of people offering covers music, originals music. It's kind of around. So we played, and we really appreciated it. Played from 1:30 to 2 hour set. Sound was amazing again. That's 2 gigs. We've had really good sound support. I'm really, really happy about that. Really makes me feel good, But I'm planning on doing an interview with a band soon on here. I won't say which of the bands because it's not fair, but we may talk about it when I speak to them. But they're a young band and really good band. And I thought when we'd finished, they were on about 2:45, and I thought, maybe I'll go and see them. I'll go and have a look. And I had to really walk a long way to find their venue, right out of town. It's right out of, and it's this lovely little sort of kiosk sort of place, right by the waterfront. And they again put a big marquee up, lots of picnic tables and that. And the thing with it was that they had maybe 20, 25 people, all older people, I would say, and it's a place where people walk their dogs, and it was almost like they were dog walkers had stopped by, you know. And I was watching this young band and thinking, yeah, I kind of get this feeling, you know, because the space is not there for all of us to play. So there they are playing in this tiny place right away from the town where there's all these venues and places playing. Sounding really great, doing their thing. Really proud of them and really, you know, really enjoyed it. And I'm going to tell them that when I speak to them. I sent them, I videoed a little bit and sent them. I said, look, I'm here, but you know, I haven't got a chance to stay. I managed 10 minutes there, I think, because I was really late, but I really wanted to go and see them. And I hadn't realised it was so far away. I was knackered when I got there. But you know, you think, yeah, this is the. And as I walk back across, Lou is a sort of, you have West Lou and East Lou, and they're either side of the estuary. And East Lou is mostly where all the town is, and West Lou, it's more of a sort of community there. And where these guys were playing is, I say, it's a little bit of coast. We've been there with our dogs, and you know, it's kind of more, it's quiet. You can walk along the beaches over there. And then you come to where we were playing, which is kind of like the centre of West Lou, which is where we were. We were very lucky with some pubs and a lot of people around. And when we were playing, I think we were also lucky because we were playing a bit earlier than a lot of what was happening on East Lou. And then East Lou, you've got to go all the way along the estuary, go over the bridge and come all the way back again to do these things. So I had quite a long walk back. And as I was walking back, I could see over the side there. And there was a covers band playing in over on East Lou in one of the pubs. And everybody was outside. It was rammed. It was packed, you know. And I'm thinking, yeah, it's easier. It's what people want to listen to. I'm quite right. I do understand it, but I wonder whether it's about, to some extent, how we listen. Not that it shouldn't be around, but it's how do we create space for that original music to flourish again. I've said maybe before here, I can't remember now, I really would love to do something from this, where we create something where we try and invite that vibe of listening to original music back again. But I don't know whether that will happen or not. But it's interesting. Anyway, look, I'd probably go on for about half an hour. I don't really know. But the ecosystem of what we play in, and I think it's around, you know, helps me to think about it. And, you know, as I said before, I'm a psychotherapist. I'm a systemic psychotherapist, and I'm interested in systems, and I'm interested in whether there's anything I can do to work within this or influence this in some way. Kind of hoping that as you're watching this now, this has gotten a little bigger and people are more interested, and you know, I would love from this to have enough push within it to, I think, do something with, especially with some of the artists and people I'm starting to meet now. Okay, time to go. Please, yeah, do subscribe to this, follow this, comment, let me know how you're thinking, what you're thinking of this. Check out the band, #MusicTheCurve, and I will be back. To 10. When others have their say, things are far too complex for the man of steel.